Okay, game in development synSpace drone runners for Android, available in Google Play Store and for the Kindle Fire HD. This is on a Kindle Fire 10 using what is a release candidate for 1.07, which is not yet released. And so what I was going to do here was just try to have a clean vocoder session for someone who wants to see a clean vocoder session. And this is using copyright-free music called Jazz Tape by Andrew Huang. Navigate to an area without any barrier lines and zoom in. And this does two things. One, it gives me sort of an empty background because I'm going to just be focused on music on top of this. And also it gives me a slight boost in my frame rate. So I'm going to be using the vocoder, and I'm going to record from my magic cable here from the computer. And here's what the song sounds like. And so I push record, I'm in music mode, it's seeing notes, but it's way too loud still. So let's just keep lowering the volume. Just looking at these lines, and these lines, doesn't look too bad. But anyway, now let's pause the song. So let's delete these samples. Let's knock the volume down 1 more dB, who knows. Let's go over to the sequencer, and let's delete this track that I had. And let's turn off the metronome. And then go record. So now it's recording, and if I type something here, it'll hear it. So we'll have these little notes at the start of our song. Then I come over here and I just go into record mode. Oh, I was already in record mode. So I go over here and I just play the song, and as it hears the notes, it documents them there, but it also is sending them into the track, into this new track. So those are the notes I typed myself earlier on, and these are the notes that it's vocoding. Now, while I have all this stuff turned on, it lowers my frame rate, and there's some danger of the recording being compromised if your frame rate drops low enough. So if I was really just trying for the best possible encoding, I would shut everything down and watch the frame rate and make sure that it never dropped below 25. But that's boring, so let's watch this. So the rhythm rainbow here is doing several things. One, these colored lines here represent notes that it's detected. Each note, C, D, F, G, A, B, is colored a color of the rainbow, Roy G. Biv. And you can see that up here, but also for each individual frame, I track them sideways here. So this is those things, those changes over time. So if you see parallel lines, you're basically seeing notes of a chord. And above, you see my attempt to analyze those lines to see if they are a chord. So you can, in theory, watch the chord progression of the music in real time. But obviously in transitional points, it kind of runs to mama and tries to come up, it'll find, E sustained 4, E flat sustained 4, which is really just because the crazy notes you played that happened for a moment to be in E flat sustained 4. But I don't know the difference, so I just spout out everything I think I see. Over time, I'm also trying to figure out the beats per minute of the song, which looks like I think is around 90. And what key signature in, and I don't make any claims about that working yet. So I kept the long-term average to under 12 million, so that's pretty good, under 13 million. So we stopped this recording, and remember that we are actually doing 2 recordings at once. We're doing the vocoder recording in order to analyze live sound and turn it into a note stream, and then we were doing a sequencer recording, a track recording so as to record this track of information on track 1. And it starts here. I'm just going to mark some things in case it didn't get them. This is what the song looks like. Lots of notes. Lots of notes. If it's got 4,096 notes, that means I went over. 2,468. Okay, so this is what it thinks is the complete song. It thinks it got every note. I suspect it got a few extra beyond that. And we can zoom in. So that's what it looks like. And if we look to the left of the starting line, we should be able to see the notes I played. Yeah, those are the notes I played. Ding, 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 ding. And if we care enough, someday we'll delete those. Okay, but before we listen to the track we recorded, let's listen to the vocoder, the spectral playback. And for that I need to do this so you can hear it. And we'll just play the whole thing to start with in spectral mode. Can you hear that? This would be a good point for me to have the fan turned off. You can hear some squeaky notes up here that they're probably, the energy was probably really there, but it wasn't really a note. It's I have a false trigger. You can hear these little flourishes where they go ring through a spectrum, through a sweep of notes. Spectral playback mode tends to be a little slower than the real recording. It's just it's actually the same reason why you hear the little clicks and pops during the playback. Let's switch to the end. Okay, so I use the range control here, if you can see it. So we're now looking at the last 500 samples or so. So this is the end of the song we recorded. Okay, so here is a snapshot of the final umpteen samples, and if I just tap anywhere in this area up here, you can see a little cursor goes to that area, and it shows me just that one spectrum. So I can just listen to a recreation of what was happening, and if I just tap at random, I can kind of replay the song. Not at random. Which I could also do by pushing the play button, of course. But now I can also just tap, I think I tap on the left side of this entire control, and as you can see I'm now stepping one step at a time. And if I tap anywhere on the right side, yeah, excellent. So now it's a little easier to explore transitions. Like, you might ask yourself, well, this blue note here, that's an F sharp. Huh, I thought that color was G. So let's watch that F sharp. There's clearly an F sharp playing right now, it thinks, and it's at about 8 million, so it's a substantial signal. So we go back in time until there isn't an F sharp. So just before the F sharp, we see a tall gray bar. Can you see that? Yeah. Tall gray bar. That means that we saw energy, but we had not yet considered it to be a note. And the very next frame, we've decided, it's a note. So if we go back before this gray, another thing, we see, again, this is F sharp, F sharp. So there's no energy, no energy. Okay, so for several frames before, there's no energy, no energy, no energy, no energy, and then there's a lot of energy. So the note really started here. And then in the next frame, the energy has been around long enough for us to say, oh, I guess it's going to stay. So then we watch it, and it stays for 2 frames, 3 frames, but it's a little smaller. 4 frames, 5 frames, 6 frames, 7 frames. So it stays the most important note ever for a while. And now we see that the F sharp, is starting to go away. Well, no, that's not entirely true. I think the F sharp is right where it was, but this F all of a sudden is coming out of nowhere, and it's even louder. And now there's an F. So we went from F sharp to F. So we're playing an F sharp, and then we played an F. That's kind of a small transition. And then again, I guess that counts as playing a scale. You're allowed to. What you can do, you can just sort of step through. You can see these notes were kind of swelling. But now, this scale here is a little disturbing here, because if you look at max 2363, that is the scale of the graph. And if I move along a way, we see that the max is now 12 million. So this peak, the tallest thing in here, is 12 million. Those other peaks are still there, like this guy here. I'll bet he's still there. But now look how little tiny he looks. But he hasn't really gotten any tinier. We've just gotten this insanely much louder thing out of nowhere. So that has a distorting effect that it's hard for me to balance. Because eventually I get to this point, at some point in my analysis, and I say, well, there's only one peak in this frame that's worth worrying about. When really these guys are just as worth worrying about as they were before. But wow, that note is just a lot louder. Well, maybe it's fair to say that other section was very quiet. In any case, that's what spectral playback sounds like. If I just play back the raw samples, look how noisy that is. And yet it was still able to pull the frequencies out. And again, a particular spectrum might have, like this one has 2 E's in it, 2 yellow E's, but in different octaves. This looks like E3 and E2, no others. But during the time that both those were up, there was only one yellow line over here, because all the octaves are folded together, and this shows you just a single octave, which is better for figuring out chords. Position. If you say the natural position is for the fundamental to be the lowest frequency, and for the third and the fifth to be progressively higher, you can move the third and the fifth to either side by moving them up or down an octave, or move the fundamental. And it's still the same chord, even though it no longer has the fundamental as the lowest frequency. And that's called an inversion, a word I learned recently. And just below all the colored lines is this gray pulsing line, and that's all the colors together, right? So it's the full energy content at that moment. So we can see this white area here. We know that the signal is really loud right there. It was really loud right there. And it makes sense. There are a lot of notes playing, so it was loud. And over here, there were fewer notes playing, and it was quiet. Now, you could have a single note that was very loud, but the point is that this gives you an idea of the time-varying energy. And So play it back in spectrum mode or format mode, and it'll repaint this nicely. Okay, so now the white lines represent during a normal recording instead of me just bouncing around. And I use this information to try to determine the beats per minute. So I look for leading edges, rising edges, moments where the sound suddenly got a lot louder. And I try to get a feeling for what's really loud right now. So like if I'm in a loud part of the song or a quiet part of the song, I have to have a different sense of threshold. But I also get that by just doing a long-term average of the energy. So if the song's been quiet for a while, then my threshold comes down. And that's kind of how humans work also, so I feel okay about that part. Anyway, so I kind of get an idea of the time between the biggest beats, the biggest sounds, and I assume that the loudest, loud transitions are going to be beat transitions. So when I get one, I compute how many milliseconds it's been since the previous one. And the idea is if I saw every beat and they were booked perfect and I didn't see anything else, that distance would always be the same, that duration would always be the same. And I would be able to average it over time, and I would say, oh, well, my time between beats is this, and so therefore my beats per minute is that. But of course I don't hear every beat, and there are loud events that aren't on the beat or that are, on 16th notes within the beat, that kind of thing. So I've had to come up with an algorithm for that, and I like simple algorithms. So what I've done is I say I have a current estimate of what I think the beat is, and when I get a new delta time between loud events, I say, is that really close to my current guess? And if it is, then I'll just kind of average it into my current guess. I'll adjust my current guess to be a little closer to this, thinking, well, maybe the guy is slowing down, maybe he's speeding up, maybe the performer is speeding up, maybe the performer is slowing down. So I need to kind of keep track, and so I'll widen it out or shorten it up. But now, what if the beat is missing and it comes in really late because I missed a beat? And so I actually, a 2-beat interval happened before I heard the next thing. Well, what I do is I check it and I say, well, this is not anywhere near my guess, so I know something is a little screwy. So I'll start asking myself, is there any chance that it's exactly twice my guess, as in I missed 1 beat? Or is it, 3 times my guess, as in I missed 2 beats? And if I can sort of see a modularity there, I say, well, okay, it's still on the beat, I just apparently missed something in between, so I think I missed 3, so I'll take this interval, I divide it by 3, and that's what the real interval was, and then that's what I'll average into my guess. And then if I get quicker notes than expected, I do something similar where I say, is there any chance that this is exactly half my expected time, or a quarter of my eighth of my expected time, a 16th of my expected time? And if it is, then I'll say, well, this could just be a note that happened to be happening. But if it's happening twice my normal time, I'll say, well, then I'll double it and I'll average myself towards that. So again, even those notes can help me detect when the song is slowing down or speeding up. Anyway, the first pass of it was horrible, and the current pass is pretty good, so I can believe that this might have actually been a 90 beats per minute song. And because of that, when I was doing the sequencer recording, ideally I would have preset my beats per minute to 90, and then it would have lined up better, but I didn't. So where are we? We have already played this back and talked it to death. So let's see. So that's the Vocoder recording. So let's park that in a quiet area, And now we'll come back over here to the vocoder and we look at the tracks, and we already looked at the song. It looks pretty good, noisy. I'm not sure what instrument we had selected at the time. Hammond organ. So it's going to be played back as if it had been recorded on the Hammond organ, which is kind of the whole point of this anyway. So I like, you can see these shapes. There's a converge. Now, of course, I don't have this song memorized in any way, shape, or form. So part of the challenge is to try and hear the original song, and it's usually pretty hard. The end. Okay, and what else should I say about that? This is new. I'll be talking about this more later. And it'll have a button to turn it on and off. It's a chording piano, so you can, if you just want to set a key signature, like let's say you want to be in F minor. F minor. Now we know that the 1, 2, 7 key chords are F minor, G minor, A flat, B flat, C minor, D minor, and E flat, which you can play yourself. Whatever. Could I play an F minor chord? Here, let's see. 1, 2, 3. F minor. Do they agree? Is that F minor? Hey! I agree with the computer. I agree with my own computer. Anyway, so I'm working on some arpeggiation things. Oh. It's very uneven still. That needs to be just robotically perfect, and then I need to blemish it for humanity. But gotta be perfect first, then blemish is okay. Blah, 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 blah. And that's all I wanted to do for this particular thing. I can change the instrument though. Let's say I pick a different instrument. Tuba. And now let's go to our song, go to the band tab, and let's change the Hammond organ into a tuba. Okay, and then we'll go back over here, and we'll push play. Everything sounds better on the tuba. If I turn on the invisible filter and then slide the thing up so that those high notes are completely off screen, it won't play them. Let's turn on the filter out of key, so now it won't play any notes that are on dark lines. So this is what it sounds like with just the notes that are just the local white notes of the key. Nothing says that you have to do that. If I liked it, I can come over here and I can clone it. And this is again was called Jazz Tape. So we'll call it that name. It's called Jazz and Blues Calm. So I'm gonna just pause this tape and then start another one and do a less calm song. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go to the vocoder. We'll clear the old experiment. Okay, so we're going to record at -1 dB, and over here in our sequencer, we clear the old recording and we start a new recording. So now anything that comes in, like these notes here, will get added to the track. I won't play there anymore. But if we come over here to the vocoder and we put in and record, now any notes that it hears will also be sent to the sequencer and get recorded. So we'll play this song. Okay, turn it up so you can hear it. Okay, so what we're looking for here is this energy bar at the bottom. We want to see good pulses of So a colored bar represents a frequency that it, well, these are all official musical note frequencies, but a colored bar is a note that I feel I heard. And so like this blue color here, that cornflower blue was a flat. And reds are C's, yellows are E's. If you know Roy G. Biv, you map that on top of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and you can work out your own little color map. And we've already gotten 3,000 events, so we're going to overflow. We're getting way too many events. So we'll just stop it prematurely. Down here, that's what the signal looks like when we're recording. Okay, we're just going to stop it now. So let's stop the recording, and now we're going to switch back to the sequencer and stop it because it's a separate recording. So let's see what it sounds like. Okay, visually you can see that there's a bump, 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 bump happening. Can you see that? Maybe you can't see that. But there's a very low, this must have been a drum. Boom, 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 drum or a bass. Any one of these so-called attenuator controls, what you do is your finger starts, you have to touch inside, at which point it just tells you what the current setting is. Minus 18.7 decibels. As I move my finger down but stay in contact with the glass, I don't have to stay inside the original square. So I'm going to turn that back up a little. But now I'm going to turn it off by selecting it to get the detail screen for just FM and then tapping its control slider. So let's not turn this into an FM synthesis lecture. Let's just make oscillator 1 be a simple oscillator. And I like to have run these guys like down 3 dB. Negative 3 dB. Okay, so getting back to it, my keyboard generates basically 64 gate signals. And they're just on-off. They're not velocity sensitive in any way. And those are used to spawn up to 5 at a time note events. But of course, I can start 5 note events really quickly. And if the notes themselves live a long time, I can then start another 5 note events fast enough that now there's 10 notes alive at the same time. And I do that again and again and again and again and again, and I can have 100 notes alive at the same time. And that will probably lag out. So total number of notes alive is more important than how many keys you can hold down at the same time. Now, what's a note? What happens to a note? Well, as we saw in the synthesizer, it has these 6 contour generators, which on this guy are set to these 6 things. Any one of them you can change as you see fit, and you can turn sustain back on. I usually have sustain on, but usually I bias it. I don't usually have a lot of interest on the downside. It just usually gets quiet. So I'm mainly concerned with, at this point, the sustain point, how loud is it going to be? Do I want a really loud sustain? I can make it look more dramatic on the scope by doing that. So that's the newest sample, the most freshest sample, and then I have about a second's worth of data going in that direction, or a half second's worth of data. And I can zoom in on that. So this is that individual note. Okay, that's one note. So you think about these musical oscillations, these pitch oscillations, and I don't know about you, but I think of a whole bunch of them happening. You know, it's like, this is a short note, but even then, you know, I'd say, oh, there must have been 1,000 oscillations. But of course, if it was 1,000 oscillations, you know, there's reasons why your math would tell you that wasn't the case. But anyway, so it's just a few oscillations here at this frequency, which I think is middle C. Yes. Middle C. Oh yeah, I tell it there now. C4, can you see that? C4 is middle C on this keyboard. Oh, one note. Okay, so you can see the overall envelope the contour generator provided. It got as big as possible right away. It stayed big for a little bit, and then came down a bit, and then really slowly came down. So these don't completely line up here, but I guess I could make them line up. But I'm not gonna, because you can see right there is the point of inflection. So that part there should line up with this part here, and then after that point it's this red decay is there. So so let's bring this down a little bit and bring this, let's just have more of a slope over that period. So it's a little more continuous. And okay, let's bring this way down. This is logarithmic again, so this may have a bigger effect than it would appear. Yeah, okay. So now this is a noticeably, a visually larger pulse. And it's not louder than it used to be. The maximum loud is the same as it was before. But it sounds punchy. Okay, and you can see it's a sawtooth. Right? We selected sawtooth. Now, is it the right? Hey, good. Look at that. In theory, it doesn't matter. These are supposed to sound the same. What do you think? Here's you slamming the atmosphere just mercilessly with a square wave. And yet that sounds more musical. And here's a triangle wave. Problem with sine waves is that they are so piercingly mono-frequency that they tend to be quieter because, for example, your ear, it only has so many little ear hairs that are tuned to this exact frequency, and the other hairs don't really add much of a sense of loudness for you. But when you've got some harmonics, even if they're not really obvious. You're wiggling both that original fundamental frequency hair, but you're also wiggling these harmonic hairs, and so you may have twice as many hairs wiggling, and so just from that alone it may sound twice as loud, even if the actual, you correct the amplitude so that it's not really louder. I think that's true. If you're just listening to it directly, sawtooth is too bland, triangle is not too scary, sawtooth is harmonically rich but pretty buzzy, and square wave, you can't depend on it sounding as musical as it does right here. And of course I can then distort things, so here's going to be a square wave that's mostly up, and here's a square wave that's mostly down. Do they sound different? And here you also get this brrrr. That's because when I'm asymmetric like this, the right thing to do would be to also slide the waveform up and down a little bit, because what I really want is I want the area, you're basically moving the center point here, and I want the area under the curve on the left to be the same as the area on the curve under the right, and to the degree that they mismatch, your waveform, in addition to going up and down, it picks up a DC bias that makes it, slowly rise up or slowly rise down. Not so slowly when you're, way off like that. But ignoring that for a moment and having this asymmetrical pulsed wave, this not being all that dissimilar for what happens in the human throat, that your vocal cords make a signal not unlike this. But again, I'm putting this through this envelope, so it has that shape. So I could make it more speech-like, perhaps, by do a bandwidth filter, and we'll just have it change over time. We'll bind this to that one. It's just flat. There's the 12 hertz. So where's that 1 hertz coming from? Oh, this guy. It's 2 hertz. So this gives me sort of a voice-like. Let's pretend that that's a little, what would you call that? A funny voice. A little voice-like. Vocal? Okay, let's find some old song. Let's do Sally. Okay, so we're going to go to band, and we're going to change Sally's recording from Hammond organ to be vocal. And we did save it, so we can do this. Okay, now, what's it sound like Bagpipe music simulator. Glissando is usually a monophonic instrument feature where you're only playing one note at a time. So what happens here is each new note that gets started becomes the glissando target, and then the glissando engine slowly moves the current pitch of the oscillator to not in one step to the new frequency, but in a tiny step towards the new frequency. But since so many notes are starting at the same time, it's getting pulled in all directions, and it's not even really landing all the way at a destination note before it gets sent off in a different direction. So it's kind of the first derivative of the music. Well, that's pretty cool. Okay, end of film.